I wanted to introduce everybody to Bill Keegan, my friend here. Today is October 27th, 2020, and this is the 27th installment of the Legends of the Steel Pipe Business interviews.
Really?
Year
Wow.
number 27. So it's been a fun 2.5 year project, and you know, I'm hoping to continue this as long as they'll allow me. So anyway, we're going to start with an interview today with Mr. Bill Keegan. All right?
Great.
Very good. So Bill, you started in the pipe business about 50 some odd years ago, so we got some ground to cover. you better get to be exposed.
That's scary.
Right. What year was it that you started?
Let's see, 73, I would say.
1973.
Yeah.
And that was with who?
Kaiser Steel.
And Kaiser Steel was out of Napa, California?
Well, the headquarters were in Oakland, and then they had a mill in Fontana, Southern California, and another one in Napa. And I think they had another one also, but I don't recall right now. And I began in Oakland, as everybody did, in a training, and then I was transferred to Los Angeles as an inside salesman. Did that for probably 1.5 years, and then went up to Oakland as a product analyst for what turned out to be tubular products, and then was promoted to an outside sales guy. I was the youngest outside salesman they ever had with the least amount of time with the company.
Well, what took you to Kaiser in the first place? Were you fresh out of college?
No, I out of college, I thought I wanted to get into urban planning, and I asked everybody, you know, where do you do that? And everybody said work for the state, so I got a job with the state, and I hated it. In my 6-month review, they said, you're ruining it for the other guys, you work too hard. Well, you don't tell somebody 22 years old they work too hard. So I went back to University of San Francisco and took some placement kind of tests, you know, that would tell you what you'd be good at. And it was all sales and marketing. And I had an offer from Procter & Gamble. I had one from Kaiser, obviously. And I don't know, 2 or 3 other places. And Procter & Gamble wanted me to go to Cincinnati. And I think it was Mobil Oil wanted me to go to Dallas. And I knew with Kaiser, I'd essentially be on the West Coast and probably in Northern California or Southern California. And that was my preference. So that's actually how I ended up at Kaiser.
You grew up in the Bay Area?
Yes, I'm a native San Franciscan, 5th generation native San Franciscan. So at the time, I was living just below San Francisco, near the San Francisco airport, probably South San Francisco or Burlingame, I can't remember right now. But so I wanted to stay local, and they would hire what they termed a class. So I think 6 or 8 of us, maybe 10 of us started at one time, and a couple guys left, you know, probably in 30 days, and a couple guys left in 3 or 4 months. And I think we ended up with 4, and one of the 4 guys lived close to me, and we've maintained a friendship, although we don't see each other much anymore. But a guy named Dick Oakes and I were friends and commuted together and that kind of thing. And he lives up in Roseburg, Oregon now.
Very good. And so you worked for Kaiser, started in 53, moved to
73.
73, and they moved you down to LA. And
as an inside guy, then up to Oakland again for a product. That's where all the product analysts were. And then I wasn't really there very long, and an opening came about in LA for an outside salesman, and I was chosen quite to my surprise. And as I said, I was the youngest guy with the least tenure with the company. So it was a lot of fun.
How long did you work with Kaiser?
Oh gosh. I would guess until about 78 or 79. It wasn't a real long time. But I left Kaiser and went to work for one of my customers that was based out of Bakersfield. It was called Cal-Cut Companies. Sure. And they had bought a facility that was a tank part of what they did was tank manufacturing in addition to the pipe business. And they bought a tank manufacturing shop up in Reno with the plans to expand it. And Reno sounded like a great place to me. I didn't want to live in Bakersfield. And so I took a job with them with the intention of going up to Reno, and that's what we did. And we put in a facility up there. And because of my ties to Kaiser, I was able to get product from Kaiser, and then I developed a real good rapport with U.S. Steel, specifically out of Geneva, and I ended up taking all of their secondary and excess prime, and that's mostly what I sold for the first several years. And that was primarily resales to other distributors, although I did do some end user business for piling in particular.
Right, and the name of that company was not Calcut, but it was
up there. It was called Nevada Tank and Casing.
Nevada Tank and Casing.
Yep.
I remember buying pipe from you.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, as that. And how long did that venture last?
Oh, a few years. Trying to think of what. Yeah, probably into the early '80s sometime.
Yeah, and then from there, what
from there, I think I went to Republic Supply Company, and I worked out of Reno for a short time. They didn't have a facility in Reno, but they wanted to put a pipe, valve, and industrial supply facility in Reno. So because I was there, we found a place that had a good sized yard, and we did a fair amount of secondary pipe business out of there also. And then ultimately they wanted me to run their pipe division, so I transferred to Bakersfield and worked in Bakersfield for a few years.
For
Republic Supply Company.
Republic Supply Company.
And they were owned by Fluor Corporation.
Oh yeah, big guys.
Yeah.
Right.
So we had pretty good pockets.
Yeah. And were you inventorying prime pipe, or was it
both? But most of what I did was secondary and excess prime.
And was that how you kind of got into the piling?
Yes. Yeah, because that's piling takes large single lots, and there's normally some willingness to change a design size as long as you can maintain the specific load capabilities that they wanted and so forth. So we were able to sometimes use a high strength steel in a slightly lighter or possibly smaller diameter, lighter gauge. So you could mess around with it a little bit. It wasn't quite as structured as a typical pipe application that's Schedule 40 or Schedule 80.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And so were you in Bakersfield for a fair amount of time?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, that's with Republic.
Yep.
And then from Republic, where did you go after Republic?
I don't even recall. I guess I did some of them. I guess I kind of somewhat retired and then did some stuff on my own. I think that's
pretty much.
Yeah.
How did you get? What time frame or portion of your career did you go to work for Skyline?
Skyline would have been in the early '80s, I guess, up in Reno is where I started. Then I went down to Bakersfield and stayed there with them for a few years, and then I guess maybe I know what I did. I went from Bakersfield. I moved, I left Skyline and hired up with Dave Nicolai.
That was in the late 80s.
Yeah, and Dave's business was based in Portland, and he didn't really care where I was. So I said I wanted to move to Sacramento, and so I moved to Sacramento and worked for him in Sacramento for a few years. Not a real long time, but a few years.
Yeah, because piling was his main.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I believe still is. Dave Nicolai was actually NASPD president.
That's right.
For a 10.
Yeah, I actually introduced him to NASPD.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, he was a kind of small-time operator at the time. This was a long time ago.
Right. Yeah, I want to say sometime in the 90s, early 90s,
yeah,
or something like that Dave Nicolai kind of did that.
He had a financial partner named Ray Town, and Ray did the financing and stuff for him, so that's how he made the business work.
Gotcha. Very good. Okay. So Skyline was kind of one of your later in the career, if you will. I want to say I'm going by memory, so don't let me put words in your mouth.
No, it was kind of in the middle, I guess.
Middle?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, again, they were owned by Fluor, so we had some pretty good pockets. And I had demonstrated an ability to U.S. Steel to be able to move their product. Because a lot of guys say they want to get into the secondary business or the excess prime business. And the problem is, if you're in it, you've got to take what they generate. It's not something where you decide to order what you want. If you agree to take it, you take it. Right. And I had demonstrated an ability to them over the few years that I could in fact take what they generated, which in some cases was 4.5 inch, which is a long ways away from piling, but right. We were able to continue that, and they continued to sell me as I moved from place to place because I had demonstrated the ability to move what I told them I would move, and that was important to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had developed a really good rapport with a guy named Bill Hummer, who I'm still in touch with from time to time.
Wow, that's awesome. Is Bill still alive?
Yeah, I tried to reach him a couple of months ago, and I wasn't able to, but I didn't get the impression. Well, he was around because I got his granddaughter, and she said that he was living with his son. And I knew his son's name was Bill also. And I called there and I never got an answer. So they were obviously gone doing something.
That's awesome. Now, at some point with Skyline, they moved you back to their world headquarters back there in Atlanta, the Atlanta area.
No, let's see. Why did I end up in Atlanta?
Yeah, the Cartersville plant, Cartersville, Georgia.
Yeah.
The big spiral weld plant back there.
That was, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare for this as well as I should have.
Okay.
I
want to say that was Skyline, but
no, I don't.
Not Republic, but Skyline Steel. But maybe I'm.
No, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I was back there for a couple of years, not very long.
Yeah. Right, and then enough of that East Coast and come on back.
Right. Kathy and I wanted to move back to California. The job wasn't worth sticking around for. So, I mean, I made money selling pipe. I didn't make money working for somebody particularly.
Right, I totally understand. Yeah. And then kind of the latter part of your pipe career, was that when you were working with Robert Gribbs?
Yeah, that was actually after I kind of had retired, and they called me and asked me if I wanted a job, and I said no, not really, but I said, they wanted some help on the West Coast initially.
Sure.
And they had no representation out here. They were out of St. Louis. Yeah. And so I said, well, I'll see what I can put together. So I was able to do some work on the West Coast for them, but it got me right back into the same saddle with Geneva and doing the things I had done all along.
Right.
And so I did that for a few years, and then I absolutely retired. I wouldn't even say I was employed by them. I did stuff and I got paid,
Almost like an independent contractor.
Kind of, yeah. And I worked with Vince Hazen,
yep.
And I reported to Robert, but I pretty much did my own thing.
Yeah, very good. Switching gears a little bit to the NASPD. Wanted to hear, some of your memories. We've all created a lot of friends. And
absolutely.
When you tell me about some of your oldest pipe friends and talk about Joe Bergfeld.
Yeah.
The very first NASPD meeting was in 1975.
And I was there.
You were there.
Yes, I was.
Joe was there.
Yeah.
Earl Cohen.
Yeah.
Bobby Jacobson.
That's right.
Some of these guys that are still going today.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that like in Vegas?
They wanted a way to kind of get together, but at that time, most of those were small independent companies, not corporate entities as we know them today.
Like Pete Knowles. And Pete
Knowles and Jerry Rubenstein were the guys, I think, that actually put this thing together. And they were both out of Uvalde, Texas. And their idea was to get an association put together of what they called Steel Pipe Distributors. And it ended up being more guys that were independent than real full-line distributors. And they were guys that bought and sold stuff rather than what I would call a full-line house with pipe, valves, fittings, and all that kind of stuff. Sure. So they had this organizational thing in 1975 in Las Vegas, and I went almost against the wishes of Kaiser Steel because they didn't want to get involved in something like that. They were worried about antitrust and that type of thing. And so I went, and it wasn't too long after that I guess that I actually left Kaiser, a couple of years that I actually left Kaiser and went to work with Calcut Companies. So they were one of the West Coast heavy hitters. Earl Cohen was with Kelly Pipe at the time. I don't know who Bobby was working for at that time. Bobby Jacobson was.
I think he was still back at El Paso Pipe.
I think he was. You're right.
EBSCO.
Yep, you're right.
Back in those
with
days.
With Dennis Swaney and those guys.
Yep, and Fidel
Neighbor.
Yep. Yeah.
So so I ended up getting involved in that, and then as I went on in my career, that turned out to be a very valuable association because really most of what I sold, I was selling to other dealers. It was getting wholesale lots of product, primarily from U.S. Steel at Geneva, but Canada, I bought from IPSCO also, and other places, and would resell bits and pieces of these large lots to other distributors. And we kept people aware of what we had because it was a lot of times it was something unusual, not typical, and certainly wasn't the Schedule 40, Schedule 80 type of product. That was not, these were normally pipeline applications that had a very specific wall thickness and a specific grade of steel. And so the mills always generated at least 20% excess to make sure that if they had any deficiencies that they had enough product to cover it. So if they took a 100,000 foot order, there'd be at least 20,000 feet of extra material, and you had no idea what it was going to be unless you knew what their schedule was. And over time, I was able to find out what the schedule was going forward, so I could do a little bit of thinking and planning in advance.
And the first NASPD meeting being in 1975, can you tell me what those meetings were like? I mean, do they differ much from what we have?
Well, because that was an organizational meeting, they were kind of trying to figure out how to do it, who to do it with. There was a profound lack of the typical distributor. These, again, were these independent business guys, and it ended up, I think, to a large degree, staying that way for 20 or 30 years. I think it may have changed now, but it was that way for a long time. So a lot of the sales within that NASPD were guys selling to each other within the NASPD, because a lot of guys had a line on a producer here and a producer there and a producer someplace else, and some of these distributors just had end users that they could find product from these other distributors. So that was their source in a lot of cases. So we used steel mills as a primary source. A lot of the distributors used us as a primary source.
Sure. What were some of the other more memorable meeting sites or locations?
We always had fun in Houston and St. Louis. There were quite a few meetings in both those locations. There were a couple up in the Northeast, but despite the amount of pipe distributors there are in the Northeast, there weren't nearly as many. Of course, I think weather has something to do with it. They like to have these things in the spring or the fall. And to a lot of these guys, it ended up being kind of a mini vacation in addition to a working vacation, put it that way. And so they typically went to nice places, resorts, and that type of thing. And they were normally like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday type of thing. And I think a lot of guys, used it as a vacation, because a lot of these guys were independent business people and didn't take a real vacation.
Right, sure. No, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah. And tell me about some of your friendships that you have formed over that.
Well, when I started with Kaiser, an NASPD prior member, Bud Sayer, was the guy that I worked for. And I kept in touch with Bud till, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I think he's living down in Napa, but I don't know that for certain anymore. And some of the other guys, other people I worked for were Arliss Cutbirth at CalCut Companies. And then when I went to work for Republic Supply Company, I was hired by Bob Monroe. And so those are kind of the guys that I worked for. And then in terms of people that I turned out to be friends with, Dan Rowland, certainly, more or less because we were in the same general neighborhood, or he ended up in the same neighborhood. And Danny Spittler down in Phoenix. And Joe Bergfeld has been a good friend for many, many years. We still get together with each other. He came to our wedding 20-some years ago. And
how does that turn out? I mean, because you guys weren't necessarily in the same type of business, were you?
No, we really weren't. I think we became friends. He may have been president of NASPD. I was vice president like 3 times. And I probably was his vice president at some time or other. And he's just a really great guy. And we had a lot of fun together. So we've kept this friendship going for a long time. I don't see him obviously as much as I used to, because I'm not involved in the business, nor do I get to St. Louis much anymore. And Joe doesn't come out here much. I think he has a sister down in the San Francisco Peninsula, but I don't think he sees her very often. So we don't have the chance to get together as much as we used to. And which is too bad, because I like him quite a bit. And there were, a bunch of guys up in the Northwest that I became friendly with, and that were customers, and even in southern Canada. So NASPD was a great method to meet people, not only for doing business, but I've developed some really good friendships out of that over the years also.
Sure. What, going back and thinking back of, some of the ways the first 20, 25 years of doing business, how antiquated it was compared to the way things are now.
Yeah, I've been out of it for about 10 years, but the couple times that I've gone to a few NASPD functions just because they've been close by, or I've been able to get to them. And it appears to me that the business has kind of changed. There aren't this huge amount of independent business people the way it used to be. There are more larger companies that do a variety of businesses, like the valves and fittings and so forth. And I think that's changed. My guess is that the secondary and excess prime market's not as big as it used to be either, because I think the mills have dialed in the ability to be able to make what they need to make without having to cover their rear ends on producing a lot of excess just in case. So I don't know that as a commodity exists to the same extent that it used to.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Did you ever have, in the pipe business, a mentor, somebody who you looked up to that you can...
Well, initially, Arliss taught me a lot about the junk business, really. He bought a lot of used pipe. So, I knew the prime pipe business very, very well, because Kaiser trained us very well. I knew specs and, how to make steel and all the rest of that kind of stuff inside and out. And then Arliss kind of tuned me into the junk side of the business, as he used to call it. And so I would say he definitely had a bearing on what I did. And then actually, other than that, I don't think I had a specific mentor. I kind of did my own thing.
Right on, very good. Was there ever a pivotal defining moment that impacted you in the pipe business, whether it was positive or negative? Maybe even a toughest point or lowest point in your career, or a high point? Something.
Well, I think the association with U.S. Steel and Bill Hummer was golden. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had the product to sell that I had over the years. And even as Bill went into retirement and other people took that over, I had demonstrated myself as a good, reliable outlet for them, and they pretty much let me have whatever I wanted, and that doesn't happen very often, and because of the success I had with U.S. Steel, I was able to do business with IPSCO and to a lesser extent Kaiser. Kaiser used to take their excess prime and secondary, and they would have a list of distributors that they signed up on I don't know if it was quarterly or semi-annual or annual basis, I don't remember now, but they'd get maybe 5 or 6 full-line distributors and sign them up for the year. And if they generated excess prime or secondary, they offered it to those guys first. And because there'd be 5 of them, they offered some portion of it to all 5 of them. So it got diluted. There weren't these giant lots like we typically had at U.S. Steel. And U.S. Steel didn't have a distributor program, at least in the West, that was like Kaiser's. So they weren't making 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 14, 16 in Sked 40 and in some cases 80 to sell into the distribution network. So they were typically the guys that got the big pipeline orders, which created this excess prime. And Kaiser kind of made the same stuff over and over and over and over again, and went out to distribution primarily to these, I'll call it 5 distributors, I think all of whom were in the LA basin. I guess Pacific Pipe was in Oakland, but the other guys were all in the LA basin.
Sure. If you had something a do-over in the pipe business, was there something that if you could go back in time, you go, God,
well,
I wish I would have.
I tried to get into the business on my own, and because of what I did, it took a lot of money, and I mean a lot of money. And I put a deal together with a oil country tubular distributor in Long Beach that I thought was going to bankroll the thing, and I put a proposal together. It was probably an inch thick and went through every facet of the business and went down to meet with him, and he wasn't interested. I think he had said he was interested kind of offhandedly, and then I went to work trying to put it all together, and I don't think he had any idea that I was going to come back with what I did. And he could have funded the thing, but he didn't want to do it, and he wasn't the kind of guy you didn't want to sell somebody into this. You wanted somebody that was a willing partner, not somebody you talk into it.
I understand.
So when that didn't work out, I didn't have that kind of cash at all. I was just a guy making a living trying to support a family. And so I wish that I had been able to pull that off, or I guess I could have gone to my parents for funding, but I didn't have that kind of relationship with them, nor would I want one like that with them. So it never happened. But I think had I been able to do that, I would have done extremely well. I did well anyway, but done extremely well and probably been a pretty wealthy guy.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of money that it takes to buy lots of pipe.
Oh yeah. I mean, even in those days when the prices per ton were probably relatively inexpensive compared to today, I don't know that, but I'm suspecting that's the case. If somebody calls you up and they have 5,000 tons of something, that's a lot of money.
Very true, very true. Shifting gears a little bit, besides your career, tell us something about you, something that maybe you're most proud of, or something that gives you a lot of great joy.
Well, I was initially married in the early 70s and had 2 daughters by that marriage, and one of them, and I got divorced in the 90s and remarried in 99, I think it was, to Kathy. And I still have a really good rapport with my older daughter, Kelly, who's up near South Lake Tahoe. And my younger daughter is a nurse, neonatal nurse down in San Jose. And I don't see her or talk to her very often. she hasn't been overly forthcoming with anybody in the family particularly. I think she keeps in touch with her mom, but not as much as I think her mom would like. So she's kind of an independent thinker. And because of the hours she works and stuff, she's just kind of on a different cycle than the rest of the world.
Sure. What about something that gives you a lot of joy and satisfaction in your
life? Well, as you know, I'm well into the car business and have been a Porsche-phile for many, 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 many years.
I've never heard that term. Say that again.
Porsche-phile?
Porsche-phile. Okay.
I've had lots of them and still have 3. In fact, one's outside. And so I used to do work on them and stuff. I don't do that so much anymore.
And we used to take them out on the track.
That's right. Yeah, down at Sonoma and also at Laguna Seca. But I still do a lot of car stuff. And Dan Rowland and I, most years, this year was an exception because of the way things were, but we attend, or actually we work at Sonoma Raceway. And because we're there, we get to see everything that's there. We may work half of a 12 or 16 hour day and play the other half. And then we do go also, and I've gone to Laguna Seca for 40 some years now. And I've had the same campsite for probably 30 years. And when we go down there, it's just to enjoy. And we've got almost a family of friends that have been there, for 30 years. So, that I enjoy very much.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to hear something about that. This interview isn't about me, but I got to tell you that my little story that, you and I, of course, met each other in the early 80s.
Yeah.
When I was working at Edison Pipe and I was just a young pup.
You just started.
Yeah. But in 1995, I'll never forget, we were at Salt Lake City at an NASPD meeting. It was a summer conference. And you strolled in there and you couldn't wait to pull up in your briefcase and show me pictures of your brand new, it might not have been a brand new Porsche, it may have been an older one, but you full 8x10 color photos of it.
Yeah, that was a slant nose turbo probably.
Yeah.
I bought that. That was an 87 and I think I bought it in 91 or 92 and that was a phenomenal car. I just sold that about a year ago. I had it for 26 years, 27 years. And that was a really unique car. Porsche only made, I think, about 800 of those. And so it was unusual, to say the least. And it was also extremely fast, at least in those days. We're talking a car now that was 30-some years old.
Is that the one that we took out on Sonoma Race?
I'm sure we did.
10 years ago?
Yeah.
I brought the Maserati.
Yeah.
Dan had his Porsche.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Yeah. That would have been, I'm sure, what I brought. I've got a 928, which is kind of an oddball Porsche, front engine, rear drive, as does Dan. And then I've got a 911S 2S, and my wife drives a Macan.
And the 911 2S, what year is it?
16. And then Kathy's got an 18 Macan.
Yeah. And what's out here in the driveway?
The 911.
The 911, okay.
Which you need to see.
Yeah. Okay. When we're done here, we'll crack open a beer and go check her out. Well, listen, is there, I'm pouring over my list of questions, is there anything that I missed? Is there something that I may have forgot to ask you?
Well, as I said, I've been out of this for at least 10 years, but I still maintain a friendship with a number of the guys that I mentioned along the way here, which is a testament to how good of friendships they really have been. And it's nice to find yourself in a position where your job, which is so important to you, and your friends are all in the same bailiwick. It doesn't get much better than that. And my wife has been very supportive of this over the years. I mean, they're not all that supportive. And she's, either been happy to let me go or in many cases come with me, and met some people along the way, and we certainly have maintained some friendships with some of these people. So I'd say that's been the exceptional thing about being with the pipe business, that it's been a business that we've grown up in and maintained some really good friendships with.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, I want to thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
You know, it's you've been on my list. This stupid COVID thing popped up here 6-8 months ago, and
I'm amazed you've got 27 people. I had no idea.
you got to get on the website.
You know, I did it when you first mentioned this a year or so ago, but I had no idea there were that many people on it. I mean, the initial ones that were on there were people that I would have expected to see. But
I knocked off 8 of them back in March, the week before COVID hit.
oh, really?
Yeah, I went to Houston.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of guys that you probably talked to that I might not even know because I've been out of it for so long.
Got to check out the one on Jerry Rubenstein.
Oh, that would be interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Bill.
Thank you.
I appreciate your
You
time.
bet.
Thanks.